Hi, and welcome to Waterford Run Forge. We got a problem with the hammer. I started it up and ran it the other day for the first time in many years, and worked it pretty hard. It seems to be running fine, except the ram comes down past the registration mark about ½ an inch. On the ram there's a line with a little up arrow that indicates the maximum distance that the piston is supposed to come down. And this is coming down about ½ an inch too much. So I've got to raise the anvil up, which I've done once before because the same thing had happened. And I raised the anvil up and I shimmed it underneath with some oak shims, and after working it pretty hard, it's now showing a ½ inch reveal on that registration mark again. So I think what's happened is the weight of the anvil and the hammering is causing that wood cribbing to compress. So I think I will replace those with oak timbers. So I'm going to take the wedges out, take the treadle off the front, jack the whole thing straight up, hoist the anvil up using this to lift it out of the pit, and then get all that wood out and put some new wood in. So I'm hopeful that I can get this thing safely jacked up high enough to work underneath that anvil base. And I'm going to film this in bits and pieces. So I'm going to start by taking the accessories off, and I'm not going to run the tape the whole time, but I'll stop periodically and film little snippets to show you the progress. So I'm just going to go off of where the hammer sits right now. The frame of the hammer itself sits down in a recess in the floor. Right there. So that 2x4 is just about a perfect fit. It blocks the hammer into the recess in the floor, and the recess is just about 3½ inches. And right now the hammer is sitting on top of some oak 2x4s that are laid flat. So it's sitting about 1.5 inches up from the concrete. And it's possible I could just lower that back down. I'm worried about what's going on underneath there. So I'm going to take the chalking out and take the inspection plate off here. My bet is the nuts are quite loose, and that the anvil and the hammering is crushing the cribbing that I put under there 20 years ago. It wasn't the right stuff, and I sort of knew it when I did it, and so I think this is the time to fix it. Okay, I've got the cover off the pit here. This is exactly what I was afraid was happening. You can see here that the nut is ridden up, so that anvil is sunken from that forging session, that one heavy forging session. It has actually beaten itself down into the planking that's underneath here. You can see the edge of it there. So I think that's going to have to come out and get replaced by some new heavier oak timbers. So next step is to get the rest of the blocking out of here and get the nuts off of the anvil, get that anvil jacked up, secured to the upper part of the hammer, so that when I jack this thing out of here, the anvil will come with it. Alright, so this is where I'm going to leave it for tonight. Got all the blocking out, got that 2x4 out from around the edge. All the bolts are off, and I don't know if you can see it, but the anvil is shimmed up about 2 inches, and the hammer itself is sitting on a 2x stock that goes all the way around the perimeter. Now when you look underneath this thing, the casting has a lip on it, so it really only bears like where the anchor bolts are, and about 2-3 inches right at the edge. Here's where things stand so far. Got the hammer jacked up, and I decided to jack the hammer up as high as I could get it and still get some fixture into the lifting hole there to lift the anvil. And then after that, if I need more height, I'll try to lift the two of them together. I just did some measuring using that angle as a straight edge. Found the distance from the bottom of the anvil to the floor level, and it's pretty far out. It's about 1.5 inches or so out from highest to lowest. So this definitely needs to be taken care of and get this anvil secured properly. Here's the final state of the jack up. Got the, well, I guess it's 3x3 tube steel under the anvil from side to side, blocked up with 1.5 inches, 2x6. That should give us enough room to get the new timbers in underneath. You see the layer of shimming I put in a couple months ago, and I think when we get that out, it'll be pretty easy to see that the cribbing underneath is compromised. When I put this shimming in, I didn't jack it up nearly this high. I just jacked it up enough to get the shims in down the side and slid under. So this will give us a lot more access. Alright, after looking at this for a while, I decided I'll put the other support in right behind the anvil and lower the anvil down onto the tube that's underneath it. So now it's just the weight of the anvil, not the weight of the hammer. The hammer is sitting on these two supports. Feel much better about that. Anyway, now it's time to start removing the wood. Well, this was much worse than I thought. Yeah, you can see here, this is just completely rotten. And no wonder the anvil was sinking. It was just beating this old rotten wood. Anyway, it's about halfway out. Keep digging, and then we'll put some nice fresh stuff back in there. Alright, so I've got all the old wood out from the anvil pit here. And you can see the anchor bolts coming up through the pipe. You'll notice the bottom is rusty. When I first installed the foundation, I built a sheet metal box to hold the tops of the pipes, and then welded the rebar cage that goes into the concrete to that to hold all the pipes and the anchor bolts in the correct position, including the ones for the hammer, which are up here on this upper level. So I've got all the new timbers cut to length. So the plan is to leave the anvil up about 1.5 inches, and then to put 1.5 inches in underneath the hammer so that I have a future adjustment in just the hammer height, not having to come back to the anvil. So these are the timbers to go under the hammer. You can see they've been notched to go around the bolts. There's 4 6-inch wide, 4 3/4 inch thick for the long direction, and there's 8 of the 2-footers to go the other direction. And they're similarly notched to go around the anchor bolts. Here's an update on the progress. The first layer of timbers is in under the anvil, and these run front to back, and the next layer runs side to side. There's 4 of them, and they're a little tricky to get around the bolts. Here's the second layer of timbers. They went in very nicely, fit pretty tight. We took them through a planer, so should have a very nice flat bearing surface for the anvil. Okay, here the hammer's put back together. Took about an hour or so to jack that back down, half an inch at a time, inch at a time. And I've got the wedges put in. Once I get this run for a little while, I'll tighten those up, fill in the gaps, and then cut them off. And the cover's back down, the rim board's back in place, and I think it's ready to go. I'll show you the distance the ram extends now out of the collar. Right now the ram extends down to just about 8 1/4 inches, and the maximum is allowable is 9. So that's it for this project. We've successfully jacked the hammer up and the anvil. Got new oak timber cribbing underneath the anvil. Raised it up out of the ground about 1.5 inches. The problem we had originally was that the distance from the bottom of the piston to the bottom of the collar was supposed to be a maximum of 9 inches, and it was showing about a 9.5 inch extension. Turns out that's virtually no room at all left in the stroke. So fortunately it didn't do any damage by bottoming out on the hammer. You could see the state of that cribbing. It was in terrible shape, and fortunately stopped forging when we did, because that cribbing was failing pretty quickly. So the new distance from here to here is 8 1/4 inches. Mark Krause recommended that so that the dies could be refaced a few times without having to do this again. And the way I left it is there's an inch oak planking underneath the edge of the hammer. So the hammer's raised up about a full inch from the concrete. That way, if we ever in the future have to make the adjustment again, we can just jack the hammer, not the anvil, and then change that 1 inch shim out for a 1/2 inch shim, or however much distance we need to make up. Anyway, feel like we dodged a bullet. The hammer seems to be working great now, and thanks for watching.